Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Ameen. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahu Akbar. Bismillah. I want to start off tonight where I left off approximately, and then I want to move into actually Buzurg, and if I can get to that. I think I left off talking about how the necessity is for recitation and listening to Quran. Is that where I left off? Good, because I didn't mark it. And the Quran in a way is not something that you read or that you seek knowledge from, but it's actually seeking you. And I'd like you to try to contemplate that on your own over a period of time. How is Al-Quran seeking me instead of me seeking it? Or in addition, I should say, is more realistic. In addition. You can, of course, you can read it not aloud, and the whole aspect of the practices of what we call kafi, or silent practices, are extremely important, but they're also difficult. It's also difficult to transition to silence, as you may know. You may know that from your life. We live a very dynamic, active life. Our social intercourse is mostly verbal, and if it isn't verbal, it's physical in the sense that we react tactilely and visually to the world in which we're around. So unless you begin to see Al-Quran as something that's dynamic, as the letters on the page as living, and as in silence when you're reading it, you read it with the activity of your heart so that it grasps it, and this ta'wil begins to develop in you as a capacity. Almost like a sixth sense. We know about that because Allah, as I told you last night, gives us intuition. So we know about sixth sense. Everything we have is pointing back to our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Quran. What about the Christians in the Bible? We'll talk about them. What about the Torah? We'll talk about them. What about the Zoroastrians? What about? Different times, different places, different revelations, different opportunities. It's the same truth. But it's also in an evolutionary path, a more refined process. There's a very fundamental understanding that when we return to our process of articulation, we are in some way, synergetic way or harmonious way with Allah's concept or Allah's statement, kun fayakun, be and it became. He said, doesn't say he thought. He said, kun fayakun. Huh? And this imprimatur, if you will, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to speak and to hear is extremely important. It is a model for our own understanding and our own creative process. And this process of articulation, this outpouring of intention, niyyah, articulated, has a synergetic effect on the human being, which is why speech is very important to the human being, why we delight in our children learning how to speak, and we're concerned when they don't. But it's a two-way process, isn't it? It's also hearing and speaking. So one can hear and not speak and still respond. That is still considered an articulated process. So anyone who recites Quran knows what I'm saying is true. There's not only a difference, but there's a different capacity for understanding. And that's not to think that Allah is speaking like we're speaking. Again, it's that an analogy. It's part of a symbiotic relationship or reality of the universe's pattern. Universe is in the plural pattern. Because Allah says, Rabbil Alameen, right? The Lord of the worlds, of all the universes. And that gives us added dimensionality and an added mystery to us. Universes that we don't understand. Universes that, well, I don't know how up on astrophysics or astronomy you are, but now they're examining the moons of Saturn. And one of the moons of Saturn has liquid on it, but the liquid is methane. But it's been shown here on Earth that certain biological entities grow in methane. So what would a methane being look like? Oh, let's tune in to Netflix on science fiction, huh? All these possibilities that Allah is the Lord of all these worlds and all these different capacities and all these different iterations of life and dimensions of life. So we use, for example, the metaphor that the trees are calling out to us, you know, or I'm being called to the ocean. I am being called to the ocean. I haven't been to the ocean in 2 years. I'm being called to the ocean. Well, when you grow up part of your life in Jersey, you know, then the ocean is really important. The flowers are calling to us. Have you walked through the vegetable garden? Huh? And you're fasting? Didn't you feel like just plucking one of those leaves and something? The garden Mustafa so starts for every year, and all these people, most of these people who live in this community participate in the growing of this garden. Isn't it calling to you to consume it? Oh, I'm fasting. I can't do it. Makes the call even better. That takes us to another subject, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I'm just going to sort of give you my definition. Because we hear a lot about dawah, 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 right? Dawah. Making dawah. I'm making dawah. I'm going to go someplace to do dawah, to make dawah. But dawah is not what you think it is. Dawah is not calling people to Islam. It's responding to the hearts of individuals who Islam is calling to them. And you're a means. You're the wasila. So you don't go out promoting Islam. It's not a product. It's the person. You have to realize you're in front of that person for a reason. So if you go on a street corner and you accost people and you say, I want to tell you about Islam, you see, you're out of sync. But if you are available and someone wants to talk to you about Islam, then you're responding to Allah calling that person and putting you in that place, and you have to be humble. That's dawah, responding to the call, not making the call. And it's these subtleties that I'm trying to show you as I'm speaking about tahwil. I'm trying to give you the example of tahwil. Whether it's in Montessori when I took Montessori training, whether it was in law when I took law training, whether it was in homeopathy when I took homeopathy training, or whether it's in my Sufic training with my sheikh, I'm always trying to give you the example of what I'm talking about within the talk, within the dars. So if you learn to look for that, at least when you're listening to me, it will help you develop the ability of ta'wil. You can, in a way, forget about the subject matter and just listen to the relationship between the subject matter and the example. Another example, think about a poem. What is the intention of a poem? How many of you write poetry or have written poetry? Or a song? Write a poem. A poem is to arouse your sympathy, your empathy, or your imagination, or your emotions, or your sense of the aesthetic. It's to state something in another way so that it can be appreciated from another or many other perspectives. Or something that can't be appreciated easily can be appreciated in a metaphor of a poem. So if you begin to look at the Quran, and you begin to look at hadith, and what those teachings are intended to motivate, ask yourself, what are they existing for? What is the purpose? What is the action that's to follow? In that sense, again, you are living in a dynamic flow of Al-Hayyu Al-Qayyum, of the ever-living truth, the ever-sustaining reality, the self-existing one. The self-existing, space, one. So an affirmation through the names and the attributes of Allah tell us that there's no time, there's no space or void where Allah is not present. And in turn, that means to people of true insight that when we are reaching or when we're turning deep within ourselves to refine ourselves, our intention, our niyyah, must be relevant to our ikhlas, our sincere desire to understand. Do not approach Quran or Hadith or any teaching without first motivating yourself to understand. Just this brief intention, just one word, key word to yourself. Don't approach it just curiously. Don't approach it just with a question in your mind, but no desire to really understand it, because Islam is submission. And submission, Islam comes from taslim. And taslim means also safety and security. And if you want the safety and the security of that knowledge, you have to approach it with the sincere intention to understand. And that means that's going to help you leave your biases away, your prejudices aside, your assumptions aside. Not all of them, but at least they'll come. You'll begin to see them. Oh, I'm assuming this, but I made this attention to understand. Maybe my assumption is not right. Maybe it's not right. What else could this be? What else could this mean? And that will also facilitate this taqwil. So that our intention has to be relevant to our sincere desire to understand and to absorb and to apply the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the moment to our moment, in our moment-to-moment life. So many of us know by heart, or you recite the 99 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Joshan, the 1,000 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I doubt if anybody knows the 1,000 by heart that we know. And certainly there's power and there's blessing in reciting the names. And there's a way of developing love, like Majnun saying Layla all the time. The lover always says the name of the beloved all the time. But beyond that is to apply those attributes in the moment. So to have familiarity with something, it's like knowing stories. Like I know many Mullah Nasruddin stories, all right? You know, the Hoja stories. You can just sit and list the stories. I can tell 10 stories in a row, but unless I tell the right story at the right moment, it has no meaning. Unless the circumstance cues me to a story, then the story has very little meaning. Oh, it has a moral to it, has a principle, but it doesn't mean in the moment what I need it to mean. And yet the Quran is dynamic and it's in the moment. So what we must be doing is have an intention of making that taqwil of some esoteric point or some ayat of Quran to achieve an organic and comprehensive sense of what the Quran is speaking to us about, relating to us. And it has to be facilitated by practice and guidance. But what results from that practice and guidance, which may seem stilted and organized and time-consuming and demanding of discipline and all the rest of it, is something that's naturally within you, comes out. It stimulates something natural. A seemingly unnatural practice of disciplining yourself to do this and this number of things or whatever it is. That's the goal of all teaching, all spiritual teaching. I don't care what Buddhist, Hindu, Christian, Jewish, whatever it is, Muslim, how many numbers you do. Hail Mary, Mother of God, blessed art thou among women, is blessed the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Pray for us sinners now at the hour of our death. Amen. And the name of, you know, do 5 Hail Marys because you had a bad thought, you know. Behind that is to try to bring out something natural. It's been lost for the most part. It's been lost. The 613 rules of Judaism, for the most part, have lost the meaning to the individuals because they become just rules. And so the process that we are doing, the beautiful process that we are doing, is to bring out something natural, even if the process doesn't seem to be natural to do it. How many things did you learn by rote? Mathematics, flashcards, vocabulary. When you learned the vocabulary as a child, you learned language as a child, it was natural to speak, and natural ideas came out. It was nature and nature. But you had to learn it in a form. Come to our Montessori school. See the gentle form that we use. Nobody is ever wrong. Nobody ever makes a mistake. We never label anything as an error, as a mistake. You just give the lesson again. You just give the lesson again. And I told you about the pink tower yesterday. Merhaba. We just talked about the pink tower yesterday and how it's built. Spontaneously. So we need form and we need guidance. And how that's given is very important because so that tahwil can come about. This is also the question I raised last night to you to think about. So how do you know it's authentic? How do you know what your understanding is authentic? Well, how do you know that the language you're speaking is authentic? You're teaching your baby how to speak, right? Munira is learning how to speak. Is it authentic speech? Is it authentic English? It's going to be, isn't it? Maybe it's going to also be Turkish. Maybe it's also going to be Urdu or Kashmiri. Because we have this capacity. So it has to be facilitated by practice and by guidance, but understand that what results is not faux, it's natural and it's constructed. And so what's happening? What's happening is that you are receiving from Quran a mini revelation. It's being revealed to you in the moment to fit you and your circumstance. Yes, it's been said before, but even the Prophet ﷺ said, I didn't come to bring a new message, to create a new religion. I brought the message in a new way. So, what comes naturally if we approach the text or the hadith in a natural and respectful way is different than we approach it in just I have to read this on surah and I have to do it this number of times. And much different. Our goal is to understand, not to conquer something. So what we're doing is trying to come into a flow of aql, of intellect and knowledge, and of compassion, and of love, and of mercy, and of peace, and of truth. We're trying to jump into a river of many currents that will allow the truth, the insight, the awareness to flow out of us as if we were being created in the moment within us, as if the Quran is being recreated within us in that moment. And this is also, I would offer that the Quran is alive and that the revelation of Quran is dynamic and alive. And in that moment and in any moment, the revelation is coming to you. You're swimming, in other words, in the ocean of the Quran. Right now, this very moment. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that our guides and our teachers over generations, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, you cannot interpret the Quran. You can't interpret it. We use the word interpretation, but we really can't, it's used. Well, I read this interpretation of the Quran or this tafsir, but it's really not interpretation. If it is, it's not going to be right. And that's the reason, and And that's the reason that the fact that it is a dynamic, organic process in the moment, ever living, totally motivated or evoked from the ghaib, from the unseen world, from the batin. So try to understand the qualitative difference. Interpretation would take you one step in one direction away from a dynamic presence. Interpretation becomes static. But awareness of that moment and the truth within us, that's the tahwil. And it will take us to the source of the moment. So would you rather see the result or would you rather see the source? The result's beautiful. The result is meaningful. But you have the urge inside of you to move closer and closer to the source. And if you do, well, that's why we say tariqah or tasawwuf is the path to that. If tafsir stops in time, it is nuzul, tanzil, sent down, nuzul. It's sent down from its eternal dynamic source, and it is, in the moment, seeing or receiving insight into some meaning. But as it comes down and it becomes absorbed in us, and then it comes back out of us, not verbally articulated necessarily, but out of us in the sense that we become aware, conscious of it, that's the tahwil. You are in the moment with the revelation. You're in the moment with the revelation. Does that make you the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Astaghfirullah, no. No. Think about his character. Think about the task. Think about his purpose. Think about his mission. Think about so many other things. Think about the fact that it came through him. So you're aware of the divine presence, and you act as if you know your Lord, seeing in a sense, basira, perceiving the truth, and if not, be assured that the truth is seeing you, because it has selected you and it has come within you and you have absorbed it. And this is the tahwil of the Hadith Jibreel. Act as if you're seeing Allah, and if you're not seeing Allah, know that Allah is seeing you. Have it? Have you heard this before? So let me get to that in another way for a moment. This kind of spiritual exegesis, the tahwil, literally means to bring back. That's the literal meaning of it, to bring back. And that is to return a person to their origin. Where is your origin? Is your origin in your past? Today, we're living in linear time, zaman. Linear time. The world of linear sequential time and space, in a continuum of time and space. You stayed up all night, or you had your sahur, you went to sleep, you got up, you're here. This is going on in linear time. It's going to end, we're going to walk out the door, etc. That's our world, right? Linear time. But is your origin in that linear time? Your origin only in terms of this physical world seems to be in the past. I was born in this state from these parents, from this lineage. But your origin in the moment, we say, is right now. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is alone, tawheed, and Allah is present, and you are present in Allah, then your origin has to be a priori in this moment. Did you follow that? If Allah alone is tawheed, if there's only Allah, and Allah is present, we accept that Allah is present, and you are present, and you understand that you're present within Allah, because there's only Allah, then your origin has to be in any given moment. So turning toward the origin You have to get out of your mind that you're going from here back somewhere. Okay? That's just a metaphor, but it's not a reality. Turning toward your origin means, in a sense, awakening to the moment. Wacht. Seizing the moment. We call it horizontal, linear time, or vertical time. It's a bab, it's a door. Seizing the moment. And in a way, then, we say that the soul is imprisoned in this body because the soul, the ruh, is always in the moment, but it's imprisoned in this body which is limited by time and space and the physicality of this body and time and space. And so when you're asleep, it gets a temporary pass from the base. You know? Janine, you got a temporary pass to go off base.
Yeah.
Huh? It finds its conscious exit not in sleep, however, which is an unconscious exit, of which most we have no remembrance of and very little control over, except when we learn certain meditation to move from Ghanugi to Adrak to Warud. But in deep, profound muraqabah, in meditation, you get the conscious exit. You have the trust of the commander-in-chief. You don't have to take permission. You have an ijazat. You have an idhan. You have a permission to go off base whenever you need to, because I trust you and you're not going to go off base for any other reason than what you need to. That make sense? So it's a trust. How do you build trust? That's a whole nother lifetime of dars. How do you build trust? What is tawakkul, really? How many of you studied law? Studied a little law? Like you and I are. What's a trust? You leave a trust. Any of you have trusts for your children, or were you the beneficiary of a trust left for you? What is a trust? It's in the hands of somebody, isn't it? Especially if you're a minor. The trust is put in the hands of somebody who you entrust with the legal, moral, ethical, overseeing of that material wealth. Pretty important job. There's a liability that's associated with that. You can go to jail if you don't handle it correctly. Why we call it a trust? Because it's trust. Well, reverse it. What's the contract with Allah that you're the trustee of? We say it's the amanah on one hand, right? The stewardship of this creation. It's the amanah. But there's more to it. When let me go back to the muraqabah, when your soul has that conscious ability to return to its source in the moment, and again, we usually talk about it in linear terms. We say there's this thread that connects the soul always to Allah, as if it's a linear thread, but it's a thread of consciousness. You are, in a way, in two places at one time. You're in the body. You're sitting in muraqabah, just like you're in the body and you're asleep. But in your sleep, you can be anywhere in the world, with anybody. So we're here and we're there. Or maybe it's better said, we're not here. We're here and we're not here. And so for something to be caused to arrive at its origin, the process demands a means. You got here through cars, I assume, right? This may not be your origin. You're welcome to stay. And we need guidelines like the GPS, huh? And you need something more important, that spiritual yearning, that spiritual urge. And that becomes increased and more increased as we're guided and as we interface with the Quran, as we interface with the Divine Presence. As the Quran is read, as it's internalized, as it's activated, as I've told you by tahwil, to bring someone back. And it affects the soul. By taking the symbols of life and the stories of life and the experiences of life and the revelations that Allah gives us as human beings, as living human beings, in the form of this text, in the form of our teachers and our guidelines, in the form of the hadith, it becomes the means through which you move from the natural phenomena, the external phenomena of this world, to an internal and very, very efficacious, true reality, which we call haqiqah. So nature and history and the physical world and the exoteric aspects of the spiritual world and the invisible and the hidden and the esoteric combine to give us a sense of the means and the journey and the destination and all the metaphors and all the allegories that give us a concept by which we can recognize where we are as we travel and we see the signposts. Only 120 more miles to Lynchburg, Virginia. We're on 29, headed south from Washington. And inshallah, there's no accidents and no stop by the policeman. I'll be there, ya Sheikh. I'll see you in 2 hours. Signs along the way. And this is why we have the Anbiya. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and the Prophet ﷺ reiterated, that there has never been a people without a messenger. Guidance. And that's a whole nother thing to discuss too. Some say 124,000 messages. And the meaning of this prophethood is not found in anything material. It's not found, the real meaning is not found even in the seerah, in the biographical reality of a prophet or their history, but it's found in the spiritual meaning. The reality of a prophet, the reality of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam lives within the heart of the believer, because the thing that happens to them in the batin, in the invisible world, in the ghaib, in the world of the ruh, in the world of the spirit, begins to happen to us. We begin to absorb the presence of that personality, the individuality. Now in Sufism, you hear Fanafi Sheikh, Fanafi Risabul, Fanafi Allah. Right? Annihilation in the Sheikh, annihilation in the Prophet, annihilation in Rasul. And in some tariqah, and in some of our tariqah, we actually teach that. But mostly we don't. What we basically talk about is coming into that absorption and resonance and being moved always toward Allah. So we're not focusing so much on the Sheikh, we're not focusing so much only on the Prophet, but only as the means, as he said he was the means. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wasilati alayka wa alihi wa sallam. My means. Huh? That in no way reduces the importance of the Prophet. So think about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's up on this mountain, okay? And for the first time, he's there and a revelation comes to him through the angel Jibril. Right? Iqra bismi rabbik. What happens to him? He gets scared. He gets scared. He comes down from the mountain. He's very upset. He's scared. And his wife, Khadija, calms him down. Right? And she tells him, in modern terminology, it's okay. Everything's going to be okay, basically. And what happened to him is different. What happened to him internally is different than what manifested externally. Something was implanted in him. Some people believe that the whole Quran descended upon him in that moment. I happen to believe that. That the whole Quran descended upon him in that moment. Descended, down, came back. What is? He was brought back to the essence of the Quran. What's the term for brought back? Tahwil. Right. Aha. Aha. And then at the right moment, because the Quran is living, it wasn't just it came to him and it sat there not alive, and he had to give it resuscitate it, but it's living inside of him. How is your intestine today? Good? You know why it's good? Because you got little things living in there. You have colonies of aliens living inside of you who have nothing genetically to do with you. Huh? Who got their home there. They've got a homestead in your intestines. Huh? And you would not like to see them under a microscope. And they may have actually come from outer space. They may have been planted here billions of years ago by chemical processes that came from the stars. And that because of them, you're healthy today. Because these aliens. Quran's alive inside of us. I don't mean to make that analogy. The Quran is alive inside of the Prophet ﷺ, and the moment demands it, and Allah reveals Himself again, a second time. It's all, it's all in all those servers. Pervez, racks of servers inside of her brain. And at the right moment, under the right passcode, for the right need, it's revealed. I used to work many, many years ago, when the biggest computer was an IBM 360. This is more powerful than the 2 rooms filled with computers that I was working with. This is more powerful. Probably 1,000 times more powerful. Is that right, Pervez? And I had this weird feeling. We would leave at night, and the discs are going. And I once said to the systems analyst there, I said, when we come back in the morning, they're not going to be the same. He says, yeah, they're processing information. I said, no, they're not going to be the same. They're talking to each other. And we found out that it's true. Right? And you even use that metaphor. You say, well, yesterday you and I had this conversation about the server talking to the so-and-so. It's another form of intelligence that allows us to operate now in another dimension that we didn't have 20 years ago. So don't think this is such a strange thing. The Quran came down and then it's revivified again, or it comes back again, I should say. So what happened to him is different, and what happened to him internally is different from what manifested externally, and the revelation is not intended to cause him upset, but he's a human being. Allah, on some throne somewhere, is going to say, well, this is a good guy, I'm going to really get him screwed up and get him upset. This is not the way it works. You have a capacity, and when you receive transmission, when you receive the sheikh, when you receive knowledge, sometimes it disturbs you. Sometimes you have to make decisions. You have to make choices. And those choices are very much affected by your lifestyle, the food you eat, the people you're around, the desires you have, the fears that you have, the doubts you have, the ignorance that you have, right? Isn't that what happens every day? But does that have anything to do with the efficacy of the truth that you have to accept? No, that's independent of what the process is that's going on inside of you. And it has catalyzed or caused some transformational process, which you know that if you make certain choices in life, let's say it's a diet choice. You go to the doctor says, you've got heart disease, I suggest you go to the Cleveland Clinic, and the doctor there says you should become a vegan. Isn't it going to have a physical effect on you? An emotional effect on you? And a mental effect on you? So here we are back at an analogy again. So this revelation is just the truth, coming to a masum, perfected individual who is created to become, designed to become, if you will, a prophet. But that transformation, that transition has to take place within him. As an individual has to find its means, its wasila, and his means was Jibreel alayhi salam, and his direct means was to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in hadith qudsi. Right? Because Allah speaks through his tongue. It's not like we have the Prophet as our means, but we have the lineage of the Prophet as our means. The Sahaba, the Tabi'in, the Tabi'in, the Shuyukh. And then it's not just that. What kind of Shuyukh? The Barakah Sheikh, the guiding Sheikh, the teaching Sheikh, which one? And there has to be, just like for the Prophet, some liberating realization so that the true meaning, the hidden meaning is unveiled or able to be unveiled is the tahwil. And the tahwil of this, where's my Quran? Of this book, of this revelation that descends from heaven upon the hearts of the Prophet has to have a place to land, has to reside. It's not a hummingbird. And even hummingbirds will sit for a while. And that's where the secret of all the prophets lie. In that kind of history of this revelation, of this descent of the truth. And there's nothing arbitrary about it. There's nothing inconsistent in it. It has tremendous power. And it creates a need. Or maybe I should say, instead of creating a need, it fulfills a need. And that need is for mizan, balance, harmony. We know, again, in law, that the symbol for balance in law, equality in law, is justice that is blind, with a blindfold. Right? So it can't be influenced by what it's seeing. And it has balance scales. What did Khadija try to do? She tried to give him balance, right? She tried to give him harmony. Balance between the light he had just received, the tajalli, the fayyid, the overflowing light, fayyid, and the darkness from where he came. What, the Prophet was in darkness? Well, in some darkness, because he hadn't had that light yet. Even though he was al-Amin, still, this enlightenment had to come to him. And the science of balance implies something too. There's a ta'wil of that. If there's such a thing as balance for the individual, there must be some kind of cosmic harmony. There must be some kind of a cosmic empathy, cosmic sympathy, so that there's a relationship between the esoteric and the exoteric, between the dhahir and the batin, so that the hierarchical realms and the worldly realms have to come into balance in some way. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps us separate from those realms, Jabarut, Malakut, Lahut, Nasut. Because can you imagine walking through life and seeing all the angels that are around you? Wouldn't that be a little overwhelming? I mean, when you read the story of Isra Miraj, how many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of angels are described there? On Eid, they'll be at the crossroads up here where the men and the women meet on our procession. And they'll be here when I give the khutbah. And trying to understand each one's purpose and each one's job. How about that? How about you have the hundreds of thousands of angels and then you want to understand each one's purpose and job? Well, that's quite an HR task. Yet we're told that the angels are all around us. Sometimes we get a glimpse of an angel or the presence of an angel. Sometimes something reminds us of an angel. Like that fellow up there. Do you see him? Do you see his face? He appeared one day about a year ago. I don't know who you are, but you haven't caused any trouble, so stick around. Yet we're told the angels are all around us, and sometimes we get a glimpse of that angel, and as I said, on the Eid, they're going to walk beside us. And they're going to attend the dhikr. They attend the dhikr on Saturday nights usually. And sometimes we get a sense of their presence. Can you imagine if you were able to see all the world of the angels and the world of the jinns? So Allah keeps these separations. And that's also symbolic of something. The many dimensions, but they interact. So the exoteric conceals, in a way, the esoteric. Just like you have to open up the Quran from its cover to begin to read it. And the external appearance of something, in a way, covers the inner reality of it. I'm a homeopath. I'm also do naturopathic work. Most of our remedies are herbs that are processed in a certain way. You can look at a flower, and I can look at a flower and appreciate it and love it and smell it, and sometimes, like the nasturtiums in the garden, eat it. And certainly we're eating lots of flowers in our vegetables, huh? But that doesn't mean I know the healing power of that herb. It's been concealed in the beauty of it. It's been concealed in the exoteric aspect of it. Well, you can say, well, the healing ability is part of the exoteric. You can, except when you get into homeopathy, when you attenuate the remedies to such a degree that you cannot detect any of the original remedy anymore, all you have is the energy of that remedy. So, you have these different dimensions, angels, angelic levels, jinn, human beings, the different levels. You have tafsir, tanzil, and tahwil. And in this world you have people of different races, different colors, different cultures, different religions, yet Allah remains perfectly balanced. That point in the center, that's still. And this cosmic pluralism is reflected in our geographic and social pluralism. You see, there's always need to be resolved in harmony, isn't there? Look what's happening in the world today. Don't we need to resolve the disharmony between the Christians and the Muslims and the Hindus and the Jews and the Chinese and the Japanese and the Koreans and the Kurds and the Iraqis and the right? Between the men and the women. There always has to be this force of harmony because of that analogical reality. It is an allegory for something called harmony, balance, and mizan. So, Allah says, had I wanted to, I would have created you as one community. But He didn't. He created diversity. But diversity with a sense, a hint, an eternal vibration, if you will, of unity. We sense that brotherhood and sisterhood. We sense that harmony. All healing is about that, ultimately. Even allopathic healing with drugs that are like atomic bombs instead of subtle things. It's try to heal the body. We know, those of us who understand it's about trying to have the body heal itself. Trying to give the body back its power to be balanced. But the goal is similar. And as I've said for 40 years, it's not unity in diversity, it's diversity in unity. And it is there as another reminder to overcome bigotry and prejudice and separation and the seeing of color or other than how to see how beautiful color is, or sexism or misogyny or social challenges, war, the moral challenges, the ethical challenges, all of them which we face in some way, every day. And we have to learn to see beyond those differences. I have a whole organization that's devoted to that for 35 years. Look, none of us are immune. I marched in the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King, with Andy Young, with Jesse Jackson. It would be disingenuous of me and untrue if I would have told you that I had the highest ideals when I did that, and I was not guilty of prejudice myself. But something brought me to that and made me face those prejudices. I went there, it was a fun thing to do. Let's jump on a bus, go to the South, and help the poor black people. Astaghfirullah. But when we got pulled off the bus and we got beaten up and we were told to go back and all that, all of a sudden, passive resistance, Gandhian philosophy became real. And all of a sudden you had to ask yourself, do I really love my brother like I love myself? And is that man my brother and that woman my brother or my sister? And slowly, 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 Allah brought me from that social understanding to Islam. And it wasn't one day you wake up and you don't see color anymore. Not that you never said, oh, what's the name of that guy? You know, what guy? The black guy. You never say, what's the name of that guy? Oh, the white guy. But the heart wasn't filled with any doubt. The heart was not filled with any fear. The heart was not filled with any prejudice. And you begin to love your brother as you love yourself. Don't you think that that's the tahwil of, in the exoteric world, of understanding a subtlety? Look what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did to end slavery. Every excuse he could find, if you did something not right, you had to manumit a slave. Because you couldn't just walk in and say, okay, free the slaves. This was the whole point in the South here. The whole economy would collapse. So, very clever way. You accept Islam, okay, here are the guidelines, here are the rules. But your slave had to be able to wear the same clothing as you, had to be able to pray next to you, and had to have the same food as you. So now we're well on the way of freeing the person. And now, if you did anything wrong, anybody here knows to do anything wrong? If you did anything wrong, you had to free a slave. Is that right? How beautiful is all of this? If we're patient, we need to be patient, and we need to be steadfast in our practice. We get distracted and things are difficult. But then Allah allows us to create an environment where if you have no support on your own, look at the support you have in an environment like this. There's always someone to talk to. There's always just a sense, like you have support for fasting in Ramadan by 1.4 billion people, and whatever percentage of those are fasting. Even if it was 50%, it's a heck of a lot of people. Like we said, it's harder to fast in Shawwal than it is in Ramadan. So it's the same thing. You have the support, even if you're not talking to anybody. It's not about sharing your emotional upset necessarily, your psychological problem. This is not, this is not a place for just therapy, for therapy. This is a home. This is a community. This is sohbeh. And the vibration of it is different. And it's difficult sometimes. To do the things that are transformative, to overcome that bigotry, to overcome that prejudice. And I venture to say we have prejudice against ourselves too. And I don't mean racial prejudice, I don't mean religious prejudice. I mean, we prejudice our own attitude toward our own self. So everything is related in that search for harmony. And when you're in that search for harmony, you realize how much forgiveness you need and how much you need to forgive. And you can get wrapped up in that idea so that it becomes obsessive to you, or you can just easily seek the forgiveness because you know Allah forgives, and you can give forgiveness. Otherwise, without that, justice becomes revenge. Look what's happening in the world today. These prisoners who were executed in the last couple of months, who didn't die right away from the execution. Following that in the news? And the families are saying, so what? Do you know how badly my daughter or whoever it was suffered under them? They deserve to die not quickly. But you understand, that's revenge. That's not justice. And revenge is what keeps all those wars going. Revenge is exactly what did not happen when the man spits in the face of Sidna Ali alayhi salam as he's about to kill him. And Sidna Ali refuses. He holds Zulfikar and he holds that sword back and he said, and why aren't you killing me? He says, because I would kill you out of anger because you spit on me. He said, who are you? What is this? And he becomes a Muslim. How did Islam spread to Indonesia? The largest Muslim country in the world. The largest population of Muslims in the country. It's not a very large country. Sorry. It's spread by the Sufis, people of Tariqah. Why? Because they arrive on the shores of this place, and Indonesians and everybody but Abu Hassan can attest to the fact they're calm and quiet people. He's married to an Indonesian woman. Quiet people, gentle people. What did they appreciate? They appreciated that these people who were traders were honest and trustworthy and kind and considerate, and they had a message that was very attractive because it promoted peace and understanding. And Indonesia today still remains, even with the crazy terrorists in Indonesia, still remains a country where a Muslim family will go to the Diwali and the people in the Hindu family will come for the Eid. And the Buddhists will be praying for everybody, and it still is like that. Although there are many forces, quote, Islamic forces in the country who would work against that. Unfortunately, but that's the deception of what people call Islam, but isn't really Islam. And so that forgiveness, you have to forgive. You have to understand. You have to be compassionate. You have to be merciful. You have to be patient. You have to be tolerant. The attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And like my sheikh used to say, Hazrat Rasul alayhi Ramo used to say, don't just teach about the Asma al-Husna, teach the meditation that makes the Asma al-Husna alive inside the people. Because the Asma al-Husna, the names tell you the qualities, but the meditation tells you how to create harmony within yourself. And that doesn't even tell you how, and I guess it enables you, as I've been saying, through the Lataif, to become harmonious. It allows that resonance to take place. And when that happens, what else happens? Well, we're back at it again. The revelation begins to reveal itself to you. The truth comes to you. And to the degree that the ego is operating, that's how much it's going to be polluting the truth. It's going to change our understanding of it. So we have to cleanse, ataskiyat. We have to purify. We have to be humble and grateful and careful and guided. And part of that lies in learning how to be silent as well as how to articulate. Part of it has to do with how you recite and what you recite. But what comes first? Kun fayakun came from what? It came from silence. So what came before creation? Silence. Time for me to be silent. Assalamu alaikum.